Data and message rates apply in this nationwide contest. That's income to 200-200. This is the Ross Kaminsky Show. Now, Ross Kaminsky on Denver's talk station, 630 KHOW.
Well, yesterday evening at 7 o'clock, I went online over to 9news.com to be precise, and watched the live stream of the debate between Denver mayoral candidates Jamie Giellis and incumbent Mayor Michael Hancock. It was interesting, covered a wide range of issues, and joining us to, I guess, recover some of those issues, because a lot of my listeners have a lot of questions, the aforementioned Jamie Giellis. Good morning, Jamie. Thanks for being here.
Good morning, Ross. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, how'd you feel about the debate?
Whew. It was something. It was a pretty intense hour for sure.
I thought it was too.
Yeah, I mean, I felt good walking out of it, but I think the unfortunate thing that for me is that we have veered away from a lot of the issues and are focused on a lot of the rhetoric right now around who's qualified to lead, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the frustrating part.
So I want to make sure to start with the question that I'm getting most from my friends and listeners, and where I personally am also a little bit confused, and that is the homelessness and camping ban stuff. So you were aggressively against 300.
Yep.
But you've also given answers that I'm going to call them subtle, which is a polite way of saying I don't quite understand where you are on how, if you were mayor, you would deal with the homeless, the fact that we seem to have an increasing number of homeless on the streets, and, and all this talk about camping ban, what is it, what isn't it, what other law could you use? What's the real answer?
Well, it's getting twisted a bit by, I think, Team Hancock in terms of what this all means, the difference between 300 and the camping ban. I have said all along I was opposed to 300. I didn't vote for 300. But I've also said the camping ban hasn't been great policy for the city. One thing I think that listeners need to understand is that the Initiative 300 was not just a repeal of the camping ban. It was a repeal of the camping ban and multiple other ordinances that would have made it legal to sleep in parks, that would have made it legal to sleep on the front strip of your lawn, that would have made it very hard for us to reach people for services. So I thought that Initiative 300 was bad policy on top of bad policy. But Initiative 300 was not ever passed to address homelessness. And it has been something that's created lawsuits. We just settled a class action lawsuit over it. There's another lawsuit being filed because the language of it doesn't necessarily talk about camping. It talks about that making it illegal for people to have possessions on them. And that was really put in place when Occupy was here. So what I need listeners to know is that I'm with you on the fact that I don't want homeless encampments everywhere in our city. That's totally clear. And I can't repeal the urban camping ban. That's a city council move. So I want solutions. I want housing. I want services. And I want a plan to actually get people off the streets. If a repeal of the camping ban is a piece of that and replacing it with something else, I'm all ears, because ultimately we've only had the camping ban for 7 years. In the 7 years, homelessness has quadrupled. Our encampments have increased. Our deaths on the street have increased. And we're spending $60 million on policing homelessness. So that's the issue here. People are getting very hung up in the camping ban being the tool that we use to stop urban camping. We've still got sit-and-lie ordinances. We've still got park curfews. All those ordinances remain on the books. We were able to enforce and stop urban camping before the camping ban was in place. It's just rhetoric that the administration is using to confuse people.
And I have to say, I remain kind of confused. But one of the things that I wonder about, so you talk about, and we've all seen this massive increase in the number of homeless here in not just in the city of Denver, but near Denver as well. Everywhere. I think there was actually the police had to do some stuff in Englewood yesterday, cleaning up an encampment along the South Platte River, not too far from where I live, actually. And are you suggesting that the camping ban, like, what is the relationship between the camping ban and the increasing amount of homelessness? Because I kind of feel like we get into all this talk, as you mentioned, services and housing and all this for the homeless. This is going to sound a little heartless, but I kind of feel like this city is going way too far in doing stuff for the homeless and attracting more homeless to come to Denver.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, the funds we're spending right now aren't on any type of services or housing. I mean, I hear that argument a lot. Are we attracting homeless because we're too good to them? And it's not really the case. The majority of the homeless people that are here are individuals who have been in Denver, in the region, or in the state. People don't come here to be homeless because there's a great homeless quality of life. So, 60% of our homeless are working homeless. They have full-time jobs. There's been a 300% increase in the last couple of years in homeless families. And it's related to the cost of housing here and people not being particularly mobile to have an option to go someplace else. So I think we need to turn that thought on its head. We are not, I'm not saying we're giving out freebies to the homeless community. We're talking about people that are one paycheck away from being out of housing. We're talking about the fact that a studio apartment in this city on average costs now $1,400. And so if you have a family, if you're a couple, it's very hard in a competitive housing market just to stay housed.
So is the answer that the government should subsidize that housing? I mean, I'm not sure where you go with that.
Well, I'm not talking about subsidizing for the long term. I'm talking about the fact we're spending $60 million on policing and fire and EMT services to do sweeps and that sort of thing right now.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we work with the housing, the people that are building the housing to bridge the gap? And there are some simple things like right now they require application fees that are non-reimbursable. You have to apply to get into an apartment. You have to put your first 2 months of rent down. Is there just a way to work on a partnership that would allow, bringing everybody together to solve a really challenging and complex problem? I, like you, don't want to get in the system where we're subsidizing everything for everybody, but we've got a problem. We need a solution. And again, I go back to the fact that this administration just keeps talking about the camping ban.
All right, so let me just ask you one last question on this, and then I want to get to other topics. If Jamie Giellis were mayor, would Denver see a decrease in enforcement of keeping the homeless off our streets?
No. You would see me working to get more homeless off the streets under my administration. You would see less people on the streets in my administration.
And more people being moved to services and housing, as you.
Yes.
And so then I guess I'm going to move on, but then the question becomes whether we can afford all that.
Well, it's really a reallocation, Ross. Again, we're sweeping every single day.
Mm-hmm.
$60 million. That is ridiculous. Let's spend money if we're going to spend money. And the budget has been going up every single year. Let's spend money on getting people off the streets. It's a waste of money to keep throwing it at the sweeps. It's just a total waste of money.
Let's move on. You said yesterday before the debate, and then again, obviously, it came up in the debate, that within the Hancock administration in Denver, that there is a culture of sexual harassment. You included, quote unquote, gender discrimination within sexual harassment. I'm wondering what exactly you're looking at there. And, other than the thing with his texts to that detective who says she wasn't harassed, why is it fair? Why do you think it's fair to blame the mayor for these things that other people did?
Because under the mayor, and this came up in the debate last night and was pointed out by me yesterday when we had this conversation about what's happening in the city. Under the mayor, there are sort of three concentric circles of employees in city. There's career service employees, which are the city employees that work every day on basic services. There's civil service, which is police, sheriff, and fire. And then there's the mayor and the mayor's appointees. Career service has been in place since 1950s and has very strict policies on harassment, on enforcement, on reporting, on procedure. There hasn't been any sort of sexual harassment or anything coming out of career service. But the civil service has a completely different set of rules, and the mayor and the mayor's appointees and city council have no rules. So when you talk about where the harassment and the settlements are coming from, it's important for listeners to know that that's been in the millions. And all of those cases are coming out of the mayor and his appointees and the civil service. We need rules. We need policy. The same rules that apply to career service employees need to apply to them. And that is really the point, that we have to stop this culture where we are paying, using taxpayer dollars, mind you, to settle personal sexual harassment or gender discrimination cases when there could be rules in place that protected the taxpayers from having to spend their money on that.
I'm still just trying to get a handle on how much of this an objective observer would say is Hancock's fault versus, this is the civil service and there's going to be a bad apple in any large enough barrel.
That's fine, but why are taxpayers footing the bill for it? Congress passed a ruling that you pay for your own sexual harassment settlement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, at long last they did.
I'm talking about taxpayer dollars here. When we're looking at money and where expenditures are going, Michael Hancock's settlement of his texting, sexual harassment, you can define it how you like. But that settlement came out of taxpayers' dollars, and it shouldn't have. That's the point here. And there can be rules put in place to protect the taxpayers from that. So that is the point of the conversation that came up yesterday.
Gotcha. Okay. So without getting into a lot of details which don't matter all that much, there were some conversations that came up, week and a half ago that I think you and I would both say were probably somewhat unforced errors on your part. And so some people are asking now, is Jamie ready for this job? Is Jamie ready to be mayor? And I wanted to give you the opportunity to tell my listeners why you are ready.
Well, first of all, I am coming at this job with 17 years of experience, having worked in the, nonprofit, quasi-governmental sectors, working with cities all over the world and working with the city of Denver over the last 13 years pushing on better policy. I got into this race and I forced an incumbent mayor to a runoff, which takes some doing in a system that is this entrenched. What happened over the last week, I take full responsibility for the gaffe on the talk show where I couldn't remember while I was on that show what the acronym NAACP stands for. I remembered what it did. I talked about the role of it. But you have to remember in this mayor's race, everything is being magnified tenfold because the incumbent is fighting the fight of his life right now. Mm-hmm. He's holding on. And so that thing got twisted into something else. You also have to remember, I was going on hour 9 of press conference, press interviews, debates, and coming right into that. And nobody's perfect. I'm not either. So there were some gaps. There was some digging. People are looking for reasons to bring things up that make me unfit to lead. But at the end of the day, unfortunately, it's veering away from where are we on the issues? What can you do better to run the city? And that's what I've been fighting to try to get the narrative back to is you start digging into anybody's life and turning over stones, you're going to find imperfections. But forgetting acronyms and gaps like that shouldn't be directly correlated to qualifications to lead a city or do any sort of job. We're all imperfect. We're all human. We're all going to make those mistakes as we go.
So I've got about 2 minutes left, and I realize the homeless thing is a very emotional issue and kind of visual, but in terms of actual policy, it seems like one of the lead things for you and one of the lead questions for the entire city is growth and development. And I think this might be one of the areas where you and Hancock actually disagree most. You know, despite all the back and forth on homelessness and all that, your policies are maybe not massively different, but there might be some real big differences in development. So give me about 60 to 90 seconds on how you differ from Michael Hancock on how you want to see Denver managing growth going forward.
I want to see the city working with the community to manage growth going forward. Right now, we have a zoning code that essentially allows developers to play the lead role in deciding where development goes, where density goes, and how the city is growing out. We do that because we allow any developer to walk into City Hall and file an application for a rezoning to increase density anywhere in the city. And then City Council makes that decision. City Council, who aren't urban planners, who don't understand necessarily smart growth on all fronts. So I believe that growth has to be managed, that we have to stop this one-off rezoning process, and that we have to be very careful about letting density happen everywhere in the city when we don't have the infrastructure to support that. The mayor does not agree. He believes that development drives this city, and I believe that development, the way we've been doing it, is harming the city. And
I do think there's a big difference there between you and Mayor Hancock. It might be your biggest policy difference. One thing that concerns me a little is, your background is in urban planning, and it reminds me a little of this concept that, if a guy's only tool is a hammer, then everything looks like a nail to him. And I just wonder if everything looks to you like it needs planning because your background is a planner. But I'll tell you what, we're just about out of time here, Jamie, so I'm going to have to leave it there. I'm grateful for your time as always, and I wish you lots of luck 2 weeks from yesterday.
Thanks for the time, Ross. I appreciate it.
Okay. Jamie Giellis, candidate for mayor. Ballot's already in the mail. If you're in Denver, if you want to react to that, give me a shout. We'll be right back.
This report is sponsored by American Financing.
Big accident this morning finally wrapped up and all lanes have opened on South I-25 at 58th Avenue. Traffic is back